Just remember this, a kiss is still a kiss, a sigh is just a sigh. The fundamental things apply as time goes by. And when two lovers woo, they still say I love you. On that you can rely. No matter what the future brings as time goes by. Moonlight and love songs are never out of date. Hearts full of passion, jealousy, and hate. Woman needs man, and man must have his mate.
My name is Charlotte Holloway Buchanan. I was born on Christmas Day on a farm near Kruger, Mississippi in 1932. I've started to school in Kruger and there encountered my love for books. My favorite subject was reading, and my all-time favorite teacher was my first grade teacher, Miss Fannie Liddell. And I had my first job later on in life. I was about 14. And I worked after school for an attorney. I've always loved the legal field. That's been my primary life income and also job. But I did, the first job was working after school for an attorney. In fact, when I went to apply, my father had just passed away. We had moved to Indianola. My mother was a nurse and working at the hospital, and I knew I needed to help out. So I heard about this job, and when I went up there, it was Mr. Forrest Cooper, your great-grandfather. And he said, "Honey, you have to know how to type to work in a law office." And I said, "Oh, but I know how to type." I taught myself on an old Underwood typewriter at the farm commissary. And he gave me this long farm description, legal description to type on his old manual typewriter. And it took me a while, but I took it back to him. He looked at it and he said, "Could you start tomorrow?" So that was my first job. And one thing that you had asked about was what did I do with what was the first thing I bought with my own money? Well, it was getting Christmas time, and my first paycheck, I went to the Western Auto store and I bought a BB gun for my little brother. So that was my first purchase. I was married when I was just 18, barely 18, to William Buchanan. And we had a long and wonderful marriage. He died with cancer before I was 50 years old. He had a long, drawn-out illness, about 14 years. But out of that marriage, I have 4 wonderful children, 3 sons and a daughter. And I have 4 grandchildren. My oldest grandchild just graduated from Mississippi State. And I was formerly a Presbyterian, but now I'm an Episcopalian, and I love my church. I love St. Stephen's Church in Indianola, and I go to the St. John's Church here in Leland on occasion. And I've had so many jobs, I hate to try to describe them to you, but after I got married and had worked for Mr. Cooper, I kept on working for him and worked for him a number of years. And then one day, I went to the courthouse to file a paper for Mr. Cooper, and Judge Arthur Clark was coming out of the courthouse, and he said, "I'd like for you to be my court reporter. I've already talked to Forrest, Mr. Cooper, before I offered you this." And I thought, well, I don't know, traveling 5 counties, and there were difficult times in the state of Mississippi, especially the Delta during that time. But my husband said, well, I'll be sure to help with the transportation of the children and doing the things they need to do. If you want to try, you try. So he got me a little extra car. We only had one car, but he got another little car. And that's my first session of court was in Greenville, Mississippi. And we traveled Sunflower County, Washington County, Holmes County, Humphreys County, and LaFleur County. Now, I was one judge, one court reporter, and now they have, I think, 3 or 4 judges and maybe 4 or 5 court reporters. And down at the Supreme Court, I had a friend who was a clerk, and she told me about 15 years ago, she said, do you know that you file more pages of appeals than all 3 of your court reporters in your district are doing now? So, when my husband was sick, I had a record that I wasn't through with, but it was a federal record. I also worked for Judge William Cady as his court reporter, and I had a record that was due, and I had to get it done, and my husband was in Memphis in intensive care, and there was a little place in that kind of intensive care where I could stay with him. I don't know whether you called it intensive or not, but anyway, I took my little portable electric typewriter to Memphis with me, and if one of the nurses would get him to sleep at night, I'd go in the bathroom. I took my little typing table in there and start typing as fast as I could. I needed to get through. And then one night, all these doctors and nurses and security people came rushing into our room. They said, we've got to find out where all this tapping has come from. I said, it's a typewriter. So anyway, but I did get to finish it up. I've also did a community news program for WNLA for about 20 or 25 years, and I enjoyed that a lot. It was a little live program every day at noon, and at one time we had a hospital report, but privacy things took that away. But it was an enjoyable job. I enjoyed being at WNLA, and Eddie Fritz owned the station at the time, and then he was named president of the National Association of Broadcasters, and that was my first trip to Washington. He took care of all the employees except 2 part-timers who were running the station. We all flew to Washington and went to his reception when he was inducted, and I got to meet and shake hands with people like Senator Ted Kennedy, and I enjoyed that trip. That's one of my lifetime favorite trips. And I've had other jobs too. I worked at my church, St. Stephen's, for 6 years after I retired. I got that job. Wasn't looking for a job. I was enjoying the retirement. And the minister, Reverend Wilson Webb, called me up and said, I need you to come by the church. And I thought, wonder what in the world I've done that he wants to talk to me. It never occurred to me that I was in my 70s that he'd be wanting me to work, but he did. And I worked for him for 6 years. And then my friends here in Leland, Stephanie Patton, who owned a newspaper, and I write for her. Anyway, they had bought this old home to restore called the Thompson House, and they wanted me to come be their first innkeeper. And I thought, I don't know about that. I don't know anything about being an innkeeper. But I decided, well, the children are gone. I don't have, I'm not married. Maybe it'll be a good thing. So I told them I would do it. Probably the craziest thing I've ever done, but I enjoyed it. But it was 24/7 hard work, but I enjoyed it very much and had a lot of met a lot of interesting people. In fact, I was one night I had 2 guys who were staying there, and they came in from their dinner. And they said, would you please come in the living room and drink a glass of wine with us? We want to talk about the Delta. And I said, sure. while we were sitting there, it was storming. It was 9:30 at night. I mean, thundering and lightning, and the doorbell rang. And I thought, who can that be? And one of the guys said, come on, I'll walk to the door with you. Well, I opened the door, and there was this beautiful young lady standing there, heavily made up, but she still was pretty. And I could see someone else over in the shadows. And I looked at her and realized I recognized her. And she said, I need a room. And I said, we don't do business that way. You have to register ahead of time via a credit card. And she said, but I'm willing to pay cash, and I will pay cash again for another night because I may have another guest coming. And I thought, well, I can't let her go on. And I said, do you not remember me? And she said, well, your face looks familiar. I said, it should. When I was a justice court judge, I put you in jail several times for prostitution. And I thought, oh, mercy knows, what if I had given this woman a room? My little proper and staid owners of the Thompson House would have had a fit. We'd gained a bad reputation right off the bat. And I call myself that I have 3 hometowns: Kruger, Indianola, and Leland. I was living in Leland when my dad died, and I had lifetime friends here that I love very much. And there are places here that I love, like Lillo's. I've been going there. They say they're over 60 years old. I think I've been going all this time to Lillo's, so I've enjoyed it. In fact, got engaged twice in my life, and both times I was dancing with the guys at Lillo's. So I enjoyed that. And you asked me about what my children would probably like the story about my life the best. When I met their dad, I was just 17, but I was in my second year of college at Moorhead. And Bill had been off to World War II. He was at the time in college. And anyway, he asked me out. And I thought, and he was 27. And I was 17. And I thought, I'm not telling my mom about this, but I like this guy. So we went to the movie in Greenville, but he was a true Southern gentleman. On the way home, he said, how old are you anyway? And I proudly told him, this was like in August, that I would be 18 on Christmas Day. And he walked me up to the door and kissed me on the cheek and said, call me when you're 18. Walked away, and my heart was broken because I knew. You can just tell. Well, I got up early that Christmas morning, about 5:36, and I called his house. And I said, William, I'm 18 today. And he said, don't you think I know that? I'll be over there in just a little bit. That was it. We got married in June. He was a great, great guy. And I love tennis and I love bridge. I had to give up tennis 2 years ago when I had a car wreck. But I played tennis until I was in my 80s. In fact, the last year I played, I was on 3 championship teams. We went 2 of them went to state, and my oldest one, the super seniors, we played in Hilton Head, South Carolina. So, and I love bridge. I'm not very good at it, but I love to play bridge. And I love to write. That's been I think I had the first thing published when I was maybe 14. And when I was going to school and working for Mr. Cooper after school, I also had another little part-time job. Mr. Morrell Richardson owned the sunflower toxin, and he had me setting type. And one day he sent me out to cover something, and it was the Legion Hut was on fire. And I thought, well, what is there to say except it caught on fire and they put it out. And I had about 1 paragraph. And he looked at it, he said, we got to do better than this. But he was a great guy. And, of course, I worked for the Enterprise Toxin. And those made such dear, dear friends through that. I loved writing. I guess I've written I tried to count up the other day, but I've written several thousand feature stories. And I write for the Delta Business Journal, and I write a weekly column for the little newspaper here, the Leland Progress. And then when I thought, after I had the wreck and got sick, I thought, well, now I guess I'm going to have to just sit down and do nothing and be depressed like other old women my age. And this wonderful guy, Billy Johnson, that thought of and planned this museum, asked me to come in and be a host here. And I love it. I really enjoy it. I get to see so many different people. So, but I don't think there's anything that I've left out, unless Hubbard, or do you know something?
Why don't you talk a little bit about WNLA when you were working there, and what was the hospital report?
Every day, we would go by the hospital, and they'd give us a list of all the patients in the hospital, but they had to quit doing that. It was an invasion of privacy.
HIPAA changed that some decades later. That became a no-no, I remember. When did you work for my great-grandfather Cooper?
1949, 50. He was a very, very smart man. In his later years, after he became ill, I went to court with him a lot because he would forget different things. And the last big case that I remember him, he was defending a big pipeline or somebody. They filed some kind of damage suit against them. But anyway, he lost. And when we got back to the office, I said, Mr. Cooper, you just never lose a case. And he said, honey, if I just couldn't remember if I was representing the plaintiff or the defendant. He said, I just messed up today. I said, well, it's okay. But he was a great guy, though. When he was in his few last days, he was very, he wasn't secretive, but he was a very private person about his finances and all. And he wouldn't let your grandmother, Libba, he wouldn't let her go to the bank and get on his until the very, very last. He would have me to come to the hospital. I would write the checks out for the bills, and then I'd hold his hand while he signed them. And I thought, I don't need to be doing this, but I loved him and he loved me. He trusted me. So, and I loved your grandmother, Libba. She was a great, great lady.
Yeah, one other question. Has something ever happened in your life that you thought was bad at the time that turned out to be for the best?
Well, that car wreck, and it was bad, but it turned out it was almost a lifesaver because I didn't know I had heart condition, and I found that out and have a wonderful cardiologist, and I found out how precious life is. The little things that I'd worried about before didn't matter anymore. Okay.
That was definitely a frightening time. Can you talk some more about your earlier years and your first times to try writing?
Yes, I think I won an essay contest in the 4th grade at Kruger. And then later on, I won, and American Legion had something called Americanism, and it was an essay thing. And I won the Indianola one, and this was when I was a senior. And then I won the state for the essay, and I don't remember what it was about. Yes, I do remember what it was about. Remember, this was in 1949 when there was a lot of racial prejudice. And my theme of my essay was why minorities should have the right to vote. My aunt read it, and I had a little $50 check that was the prize money, and she said, you're going to have to send that back. And I said, why? I won. They see, here's the letter, here's the check. Yeah, but I don't know how this is going to go over here in the Delta. But anyway, it went over. It was okay. And so I remember my dad always told me never to limit your associates. He said, my mother believed in unless they come from a good family, you can't play with them. But he wasn't that way. And in fact, you asked me about my favorite quote. I can remember when I was little, I was talking to my dad about something, and he said, you just have to remember one little phrase and you'll be okay in life. And I said, what is it? He said, 10 little words. They only have 2 letters each. And always remember this. And I said, okay. And here, what are they? He said, if it is to be, it is up to me. And that's, I don't know, but I've always remembered that.
That's wonderful. The Enterprise Doctrine.
Oh, yeah, loved it. I wrote features, and then sometimes Jim Abbott would send me to cover the supervisors and all of that. And Jim and David could be pretty controversial at times. We always had a standing joke that on Thursdays, Cynthia and I and Debbie Reynolds had to go to work because David and Jim would be hiding from all the irate subscribers. So when the paper came out. And I can remember it was such a popular paper. On Wednesday night at 2 o'clock in the morning, he may be just getting back from Greenwood with the paper. But the streets would be lined with cars with people wanting to get the paper early. And I'll never forget one night, we were all up there, and this little lady, a very prominent little lady, older, went to the newsstand, put a quarter in, and took every paper in it. Jim wanted to call the police on her, and I said, wait, don't. And so anyway, I got up enough courage. I went to her house and told her he needed most of those papers back because he didn't have enough to put in his newsstand. And she said, oh, I didn't mean to, it was a mistake. Didn't mean to pick them all up.
Tell about the story where you and I believe Johnny McWilliams found a band.
When my oldest son, forgotten which one of them, but we were having a senior party, and Tommy McWilliams and Dale, we were all involved in it, and the band didn't show up. And Tommy said, oh, that's not a problem. Charlotte and I, we grew up at Holly Ridge. We know all, and Dunleaf. And so we got in the car and went to Greenville on Nelson Street and had the best band in an hour. So we knew them all.
Charlotte, you've done a lot of interviews and written about people around the Delta. If you could choose anyone that you have not interviewed, living or dead, at any level, who would it be?
It would be a lady that I love so much, and the hardest working woman I've ever known, and had a difficult time in life. She was a black lady. She worked in our home, and then she would work in the fields too. And she was so smart, and I just wish I could have learned more about her, and where her people were. I wish I had known more about her. I loved her very much. She's buried at a little church at Kruger, and I sometimes go by the cemetery and take a few little flowers from one.
Nice.
But I love the Delta. When people ask me my hometown, I'll just say the Delta, because I think I could be happy anywhere in the Delta.
And I believe that's how you end your columns.
Yeah, that's what I love about the Delta.
I'm good.
Okay.
I don't know what else to ask.
Well, I didn't mean to look at the paper.
Oh, no, this is fantastic. You can talk as much as you love.
Well, the last question was, what am I most thankful for? My family, my children, my grandchildren. I'm just, my grandson, oldest grandson, and I have this wonderful, wonderful relationship. Well, all of them do, but he was my first one and the only one for a long time. But we can talk about anything and laugh and have a good time. Not too long ago, we were with his mom and dad, and I told my daughter Pam, I said, one more time, I want you all to take me to New Orleans. I want to go back there one more time. And Will speaks up and he said, no, Nanny, you don't want Mama to take you. She's no fun. I'll take you. And I thought, well, I believe that's a deal.
Yeah, I love that city. I lived there for a brief while many years ago. What's your favorite part about New Orleans? Any certain region you like better than the other?
No, I visited all the points of interest and all, and I read
Metairie and Park City and of course the Quarter.
Yeah.
The Garden District is where I live, and I think it's my favorite by far.
Yeah, and I just loved walking around. Thank you, Hubbard and Landry, so much.
No, thank you. This is a long time coming. Thank you so much.
Well, my voice has gotten like the rest of me old.
Sounds good.
Lonely time.